Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unworthy History. And today I'm going to bring you some actual history from this book, Pioneer Days in the Early Southwest by Grant Foreman. So, the story I'm going to read about today is about the Cherokee tribe and how, following the Louisiana Purchase, they petitioned to move from east of the Mississippi to west of the Mississippi, near where Arkansas is today, and this led them to come into conflict with the Osage Indian tribe. In the first message of President Jefferson after the Louisiana Purchase, he committed the administration to the policy of confirming to the Indian inhabitants of that country their right of occupancy and self-government, to establishing friendly and commercial relations with them, and to ascertaining the geography of the country acquired. It soon became a favorite policy with the government to present to Indians living east of the Mississippi the advantages of moving westward to the Louisiana Purchase, and within the first few years after that acquisition, many treaties were entered into with eastern tribes providing for their removal. A delegation of Cherokee chiefs in May 1808 requested President Jefferson to permit part of the tribe to remove west of the Mississippi, where they could pursue the lives of hunters. The president gave the necessary permission, but in order to effect the desired removal, it was necessary to acquire the title to the land from the Osage Indians, who claimed dominion over the country west of the Mississippi between the Arkansas and Missouri rivers, where the Cherokee wished to locate. This was accomplished by treaty entered into at St. Louis in 1808 and 1809. While this treaty was not ratified until April 28, 1810, President Jefferson, on January 9th of 1809, authorized the Cherokee to send exploring parties to the country ceded by the Osage to examine that on the waters of the White and Arkansas rivers. The report of the explorers being favorable, emigrating parties were soon on the march to Arkansas with the active assistance of government, and within a few years there were several thousand Cherokee living in the vicinity of the White and Arkansas rivers. William L. Lovely, who had been serving as assistant to Colonel Return J. Meigs, Cherokee Indian agent in Tennessee, was directed in 1813 to take up his station with the Cherokee in Arkansas. Directly upon his arrival, he reported to Governor Clark. He complained bitterly of the havoc wrought by white people on the game of the country which belonged to the Indians. He said that they killed the buffalo in great numbers for the tallow, and left to decay the carcasses that might have sustained the Indians. Bears were killed in the same ruthless manner for the oil they yielded. Lovely wrote to his friend Colonel Meigs, May 29, 1815, "You will perceive amongst the papers enclosed to you for the Secretary of War a copy of a letter from some gentleman to whom I have given positive permission to establish a salt work near the Osage village. A work of this kind is essentially necessary to the good of the Indians, and others of this country, having to give $30 often per barrel. I wish you, therefore, to write to Governor Clark and the Secretary of War on the subject. In all probability, this was the famous salt works near which Union Mission was located." Lovely reported to Governor Clark in 1816 that robberies and murders committed by the Osage were about to force the Cherokee to war. He secured the attendance of the chiefs of Claremont's band in July of 1816 at the mouth of the Verdigris, where he attempted to adjust the difficulties of the Osage with the Cherokee and whites. Lovely proposed to the Osage that the government would pay all claims held against them by the Cherokee and white people for robberies and other depredations, if the Osage would relinquish to the United States the great tract of land lying on the north side of Arkansas River, bounded on the west by the falls of the Verdigris, and on the north by a line running thence to the upper Saline on Six Bowl Grand River, from there east to the White River and the Cherokee settlements. This proposition was assented to by the Osage, and their agreement was signed on July 9th of 1816 by Claremont and other Osage chiefs. This great tract of over 7,000,000 acres became known as Lovely's Purchase, and was later the subject of acrimonious contention between the people of Arkansas and the Cherokee Indians. but the apparent adjustment between the tribes was only temporary. In August 1817, Talentusky and other Cherokee chiefs in the West wrote to Governor Clark that for 9 years they had been trying to make friends with the Osage, but to no purpose, that they had been trying to raise crops for their families, but the Osage had stolen all their horses, so that they were reduced to working the land with their bare hands. They had promised the president not to spill the blood of the Osage if they could help it, but that now the rivers were running with the blood of the Cherokee, they had determined to proceed against their enemies. The news came from St. Louis that a formidable coalition had been effected, consisting of Cherokee, Choctaw, Shawnee, and Delaware from east of the Mississippi, and Caddos, Coshawty, Tonkawa, Comanche, and Cherokee west, for a combined assault on the Osage. The Coshawty, Tonkawa, and Caddos on Red River, and the Cherokees of the Arkansas, complained that the Osage were perpetually sending strong war parties into their country, killing small hunting bands of their people, and driving off their horses. The report came from a man from New Orleans who said that he traveled part of the distance between the Wachita and Arkansas rivers with a large party, going to join the troops, who had with them 6 field pieces, with several whites and half Indians who learned the use of artillery under General Jackson during the recent war. While this account of the preparations for battle was probably overdrawn, the contemplated attack was actually made by a large force. Say's report of Captain Bell's exploration of Arkansas River contains an account of the engagement that ensued when the invading army reached Claremont's town. He says the attacking force amounted to 600 and included Cherokee, Delaware, Shawnee, Quapaw, and 11 white men. They sent word to the Osage that they were a small party of chiefs and old men coming to discuss peace with them, and requested Claremont to meet them at an appointed place near their town. Claremont was away from home with the warriors of the band on a hunting expedition, and an old man was appointed to act in his stead. On his arrival at the proposed council ground, the Osage found himself surrounded by hostile forces, who immediately killed him. The design of this act of perfidy, says Say, was to effect the destruction of Claremont, the bravest and most powerful of the Osage. The invaders then attacked the defenseless town, in which remained only old men, women, and children, who offered but little resistance. A scene of outrage and bloodshed ensued, in which the 11 white men were said to have acted a conspicuous part. They fired the village, destroyed the corn and other provisions of which the Osage had raised a plentiful crop, killed and took prisoners 50 or 60 of the inhabitants. In Nuttall's more highly colored account, he says the Cherokees, now forgetting the claims of civilization, fell upon the old and decrepit, upon women and innocent children, and by their own account destroyed not less than 90 individuals, and carried away a number of prisoners. A white man who accompanied them, named Chisholm, with a diabolical cruelty that ought to have been punished with death, dashed out the brains of a helpless infant torn from the arms of its butchered mother. Satiated with a horrid vengeance, the Cherokees returned with exultation to bear the tidings of their own infamy and atrocity. So that's it for this episode. I thought this was a really interesting account. Sort of in line with some of the other stories I've been reading on this channel about Comanche Indian depredations and things like that. So this again occurred around 1817 or so. It was when the Cherokees had agreed to move west of the Mississippi, and then they came into conflict with the Osage, who had been raiding their lands that they were trying to grow crops on for many years. And then this battle right here was the result, sort of the revenge for all of those depredations that the Cherokee claim the Osage had committed on them. So that's it for this episode. If you want to hear more episodes like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.